The room was quiet, but in my head everything was collapsing like glass shattering against the floor. One sentence had split my life into before and after. I'm taking the kids. You'll never see them again. Marielle's voice had been cold, steady, like she'd rehearsed it. And when the door slammed shut behind her, she carried not just our children, but also every ounce of light left in me. I don't remember dropping the glass in my hand. I only remember the sound. Sharp, final, cruel. I sat in the wreckage of my own living room, staring at pieces of broken glass scattered on the floor, wondering how long it would take before the same sharpness reached my chest. That night wasn't just about losing her. It was about losing them, the only thing that had ever made my days feel like they mattered. My body moved like it belonged to someone else. I stumbled through the hours, the minutes dripping by like poison through an IV. I walked to the window when the sun went down, wondering if the darkness outside could swallow me whole. For the first time, I thought about disappearing. Permanently. But then something strange happened. I heard a sound, faint at first, a whisper, though I knew no one was in the room. Not yet. I spun around, but the silence pressed in heavy as stone. Maybe it was my brain breaking under the weight of it all. Maybe it was something else. Either way, I obeyed. I didn't end it. Not yet. The next morning, I left the apartment without a plan. My legs carried me like they had a secret map, a destination they hadn't bothered sharing with me. The streets were wet from last night's rain, the air sharp, with the smell of asphalt and despair. And that's how I found it, the diner. It sat hunched on the corner like it had seen too many storms and outlived them all. The neon sign buzzed, half dead, spelling open in flickers. I almost didn't go in, but hunger, or maybe fate, pushed the door open for me. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and fried eggs, like comfort trying to disguise itself as food. A waitress with tired eyes nodded at me, pointed to a booth. I slid in, my shoulders heavy enough to sink the seat. That's when I saw him, an old man with skin like worn leather and eyes that didn't belong in this world. Not because they were strange, but because they were awake. Alive in a way I hadn't been in years. He sat across from me, even though I hadn't seen him walk over. "You look like a man who's lost his map," he said, voice like gravel smoothed by time. I didn't answer. Maybe because I couldn't. My throat had locked itself shut. He smiled, faint, almost sad. "Name's Harlan. And you are?" It took me a second, but I managed. "Ethan, Ethan," he repeated, tasting the name. "Tell me, Ethan, what's heavier? What you lost, or what you think you'll never find?" The question cut through me sharper than Marielle's words ever had. My chest ached like he'd reached in and touched the wound directly. "I lost my family," I whispered. "My wife, she's gone. Took the kids. And I don't know if I can live without them." Harlan leaned back, eyes steady on me. "That's not what you lost. That's what you were told you couldn't have." "There's a difference." I frowned, not understanding. But he kept talking. "You're measuring your worth by someone else's yardstick. Marielle's words don't define you. Your love for your children does. That's yours. And no one, not her, not a court, not the coldness of the world, can take that from you unless you hand it over willingly." His words felt like someone had cracked open a window in a room I thought had no air left. "But what if they grow up hating me?" I asked. "What if she tells them I'm nothing?" Harlan leaned forward, hands folded on the table. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Then you fight, not against her. Against the version of yourself that believes you're nothing. You want your kids to know you. Be worth knowing. Build a life so steady, so unshakable, that when they look for you they find a man, not a shadow." I wanted to argue, to tell him I wasn't strong enough, but my throat betrayed me again. All I could do was nod. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small wooden cross, worn at the edges like it had survived 1,000 hands before his. He slid it across the table to me. "Keep it," he said, "not because it's holy, because it's a reminder. Every time you think you're drowning, hold it. Remember, storms don't last, but men who endure them do." My fingers curled around it. Warm, solid, real. For the first time since Marielle's words shattered me, I felt something other than despair. It wasn't hope. Not yet. But it was the beginning of it. The cross felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of every man who'd ever needed saving. I kept it in my pocket as I left the diner, Harlan's words echoing louder than Marielle's had. "Be worth knowing." The city blurred around me, but those 3 words clung like anchors. For days I carried them in silence, trying to believe they could apply to me. I went to work, though the job that once paid the bills had been ripped out from under me. Downsized, replaced, discarded. First the job, then the marriage, then the kids, like dominoes crashing down in perfect, merciless order. But the cross stayed with me. And Harlan's voice too. Nights were the hardest. The apartment echoed with absence. Children's laughter replaced by my own thoughts gnawing at me like rats. I wanted to drown in cheap whiskey, bury myself in forgetting. But every time the bottle called, I reached for the cross instead. One night, staring at the ceiling, I whispered, "How do I fight when I'm already beaten?" No answer came, not in words. But I remembered the way Harlan had leaned forward, his voice steady. "Fight the version of yourself that believes you're nothing." So I began, small, broken steps. I woke early and ran, lungs screaming, legs burning. Not because I liked it, but because it hurt in a way I could control. I cleaned the apartment, not for guests, but because my kids deserved a father who wasn't drowning in filth. I applied for jobs, everywhere, even places I once thought beneath me. Pride was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. Days turned into weeks. My reflection changed, not handsome, not whole, but alive. And then the letter came, a folded piece of paper in a lawyer's envelope. Marielle's handwriting across the top, sharp and final. She wanted full custody. The air drained out of me as I read the words. Every line was a nail, every sentence a coffin. She painted me as unstable, broken, unfit. She wasn't entirely wrong. I had been those things. But not anymore. Not the man holding the letter. Not the man carrying a worn wooden cross in his pocket. That night, I went back to the diner. Same booth, same buzzing sign. But Harlan wasn't there. I waited an hour, 2, no one came. The waitress refilled my coffee 3 times before her pitying glance made me leave. Still, I carried his words with me into the courtroom weeks later. Marielle sat across from me, polished, perfect, her lawyer whispering in her ear. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Maybe she thought I'd already lost, that the broken man she left behind was all that would show up. But when the judge asked me to speak, I stood steady. My voice didn't shake. "I am not a perfect man," I said. "But I am their father. And every day since they were born, that has been the only role that mattered to me. I can't undo the mistakes. I can't rewrite the nights I fell short. But I can promise this. My children will never look for me and find a shadow. They'll find a man, one who fights for them, even when it costs him everything." The silence that followed felt endless. But in that silence, I knew something had shifted. The judge granted shared custody. Not full, not yet. But enough. Enough for hope to grow, where despair had rooted itself. The first time I saw my kids again, they ran to me like no time had passed. Their arms around my waist, their laughter filling the hollow spaces Marielle's absence had carved out. It was like stepping back into sunlight after years underground. I cried. Couldn't stop myself. And they laughed at my tears, their small hands wiping my face like they could erase every scar with a touch. That night, after I tucked them into the pull-out couch in my apartment, I sat by the window, cross in my hand. "Thank you," I whispered into the dark. Not to God. Not exactly. To Harlan. To whoever, whatever he was. Weeks later, I returned to the diner, hoping to see him again. I asked the waitress if she knew an old man named Harlan. Her brow furrowed. "Sweetheart, I've been working here 15 years. Ain't no Harlan, not here." I froze. "No, he sat right there. Gray hair. Eyes that." She shook her head, cutting me off with a sad smile. "You came in alone, Han. First time I saw you, you looked like death warmed over. Sat in that booth, talking under your breath, clutching at nothing. I thought maybe you were working through something." My stomach turned. "Alone? Talking to no one?" I pressed the cross into my palm, the wood warm against my skin. If Harlan was real, he was gone. If he wasn't, then maybe he was never meant to be flesh and blood. Maybe he was a voice, a memory, a miracle dressed up as madness. But it didn't matter, because Harlan, or the version of him that lived in me, had given me the one thing Marielle tried to take. He gave me back myself. Now, when my kids run into my arms, when they call me dad, when they laugh like sunlight pouring through windows, I know the truth. Storms don't last, but men who endure them do. And I intend to endure. For them. For me. For the man named Ethan, who finally chose to live.